began like a whisper a faint tremble, barely enough to make the birds pause mid-flight. But within seconds, that whisper turned into a roar. Myanmar shook, and the world watched. In the early hours of March 28, a 7.7 magnitude earthquake tore through central Myanmar, obliterating buildings, bridges, roads, and entire lives in the blink of an eye. No sirens, no warning, just a thunderous crack that split the ground open and buried futures beneath it. It was the strongest quake in over a century, and its echoes traveled far, felt as distant as Bangkok and parts of southern China. But the epicenter, the place where devastation clung to every breath, was right here in the ancient city of Mandalay. They called it catastrophe. That word isn't enough. Footage began surfacing online. Grainy CCTV recordings, smartphone clips, live streams that cut out missing. One video showed a man staring in disbelief as the walls around him twisted like paper. Another captured a child crying out for their mother in the middle of a collapsing street. These weren't just moments. They were evidence of something no one dreamed for. In Mandalay, a city of over 1.5 million, the air turned thick with dust and panic. Buildings once proud and permanent folded like cardboard. Ancient temples cracked open. In markets, fruit stands spilled across the pavement, their owners nowhere in sight. The Irrawaddy River, normally calm and wide, surged as parts of its banks gave way, dragging with it pieces of roads and lives. Emergency services were overwhelmed within the first hour. Phone lines went dead. The main bridge into the hardest-hit zones collapsed entirely, severing access to towns that now only existed in memory. Survivors dug through rubble with their bare hands, calling out names that disappeared into the silence. And then came the aftershocks. On March 30th, just as rescue operations tried to gain momentum, a 5.1 magnitude tremor hit near Mandalay. It wasn't as strong, but it was strong enough to shake trust. Strong enough to send already terrified citizens running once again. Strong enough to finish the damage that had been done. People started sleeping outside, not because they wanted to, but because they were too scared to go back. Entire neighborhoods turned into makeshift camps. Streets lined with blankets and bottled water. Children clutched stuffed animals covered in soot. Elders sat silent, eyes fixed on places that no longer stood. International headlines called it a disaster. Inside Myanmar, it felt like the end of the world. The death toll climbed past 1,700 within days. But anyone watching the footage knew that number was just a placeholder. Bodies were still trapped, some under temples, some beneath schools, some in houses where lights were still on. Thousands more were missing. And the missing in disasters like this often stay missing. Some of the most haunting images came not from Myanmar, but from Bangkok. In a city hundreds of kilometers away, the quake's reach was still cruel. An under-construction high-rise collapsed in minutes. 11 dead, dozens injured, hundreds trapped. For them, Myanmar's quake wasn't a distant tragedy. It was personal, and it was just the beginning. The streets of Bangkok filled with chaos. Sirens, screams, the screech of metal. Buildings swayed. People prayed. Concrete turned into coffins and spanned a heartbeat. And as the dust settled, another fear took hold. What if it's not over? Because it wasn't. Aftershocks continued to rattle the region. A particularly violent one hit on Friday, registering 6.7 on the Richter scale. It was enough to shatter windows, to send birds fleeing the skies again, to reignite every trauma the country had tried to swallow. In rural Myanmar, villages vanished. Not metaphorically, literally. Homes, roads crossed, entire families swallowed by the earth. Survivors told stories of ground opening beneath them, of mothers holding children as walls fell, of praying to gods who, that day, stayed silent. Water became a luxury, electricity a myth, medical aid a dream. Roads to the worst-hit regions were blocked by landslides, or worse, by nothing at all, because the roads themselves had been erased. And through all this, the world watched. International aid began trickling in. Trickling, not pouring. The Myanmar Red Cross established relief zones. Volunteers handed out rice, water, bandages, but it wasn't enough. How could it be? Everywhere there were shortages of doctors, of shelter, of hope. Children cried through the night, not from pain, but from fear. The kind of fear that doesn't leave you when the shaking stops. And yet, the work didn't stop. Rescue crews from Thailand, India, and the UN arrived. Russia sent search dogs, field doctors, trauma counselors. The UK, Australia, Malaysia, each offered aid, but the numbers were small compared to what was needed. The UN released an emergency $5 million fund, and still, it felt like pennies against a storm. Myanmar's crisis was no longer just natural. It was political, logistical, emotional. Roads led nowhere. Coordination broke down between military and rebel-controlled zones. Even aid had to choose sides. But suffering doesn't stop, and it didn't wait. Still, in the middle of that chaos, something kept burning. A child was pulled from rubble, crying. A woman held her newborn, born hours after in a tent surrounded by dust and plastic sheets. Strangers gave away their only food. Rescue workers collapsed from exhaustion and still got up again. Because the ground may have broken, but the people not yet. Now, as the hours turn to days and the dust begins to settle, Myanmar is facing something even more terrifying than the earthquake itself. The aftermath. Streets remain blocked. Bodies continue to be pulled from the ruins. The lucky ones, if you can call them that, are being treated in overcrowded field hospitals, where antiseptics are scarce, doctors slow. Families are still searching, parents digging through rubble with bare hands, brothers walking miles to check shelters one by one, calling out names into the silence. Every face they pass could be someone they've lost, or someone who's lost even more. In the shadows of makeshift camps, another disaster is brewing: disease. With no running water and limited sanitation, infections are spreading fast. Children are coughing, wounds are festering, and the monsoon season is just weeks away. But even so, the people refuse to disappear. Communities have started forming, pieced together from what's left. Someone brings rice. Someone else finds tarps. Strangers share warmth like currency. It's not organized. It's not perfect, but survival. And through all of it, there's one feeling stronger than fear, stronger than loss: anger. Anger that help didn't come sooner. Anger that buildings weren't built to withstand what experts had long warned about. Anger that for decades, people were taught to respect. When they needed it. The earthquake may have shaken it, but it also shook something else: the illusion that the world is watching. Because watching isn't enough. As donations flow and governments make promises, the survivors wait. Not for miracles, just for basics: food, water, medicine, shelter. The things every human deserves, especially after surviving hell. And while some move on, Myanmar can't. It's still here, under the weight of collapsed buildings and unanswered questions. It's still bleeding, but it's also breathing, just barely. And sometimes that's enough to begin again. But beginning again isn't a straight line. It's a crawl through ashes, a whisper of hope beneath the noise of grief. It's a decision made 100 times a day to not give up, to not collapse like the buildings that surround you. The international aid that arrives, wrapped in flags and politics, rarely touches the ground fast enough. Supplies sit in warehouses. Bureaucracy moves slower than grief. And on the streets, people don't need promises. They need painkillers, blankets, shovels. In the midst of rubble, a man draws water from a broken pipe and hands it to a stranger. A child, orphaned days ago, sleeps in the lap of a woman she met just that morning. In one field, a group of teenagers form a human chain, passing rocks by hand, clearing space for something better. They don't wait for orders. They just move. Because if they don't, who will? In the chaos, something ancient has awakened. Not just fear, not just grief, but resilience. Raw, relentless. The kind of resilience that doesn't ask for permission. The kind of resilience that grows in dust. And yet the silence from those with power grows louder. Statements, yes. Sympathy, sure. But where are the helicopters? Where are the doctors, the engineers, the shelters? Where are the ones who vowed to stand with humanity in the crisis? Because the people of Myanmar are no longer asking. They're demanding not just aid, but accountability. Demanding to be seen, not just as victims, but as survivors, as fighters, as people who deserve more than pity. This quake didn't just expose the fault lines beneath the earth. It exposed every crack in the system meant to protect us. And now, the question isn't just how Myanmar will recover. It's whether the world will learn. Because if this happens again, and it will, somewhere, it cannot end like this. Let this be the wake-up call no one can ignore. Not just another headline. Not just another tragedy. Let Myanmar's pain shake something deeper than sympathy. Let's shake action. Because they're still digging, still waiting, still hoping. And hope, when buried deep enough, becomes something explosive, something unstoppable,